Greetings and welcome to Play or Not to Play. I'm MT. This series will look back at some of the games I've played and if they hold up today. I was somewhat unique among my friends growing up in that I was primarily a computer game player, where they almost always played on game consoles. However, my grandfather was a big gamer and he had a few consoles at his house that my siblings, my cousins, and I used to play when we visited. One of the most enjoyable games he had was The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda was released in 1986 for the Nintendo Famicom, then a year later in North America and Europe. It is notable, among many things, for being the first home console game to release with a small battery inside the cartridge so that the data could be saved. Considering the scale of the game and the exploration required, this was probably essential to the game's success. Famously, one of the directors of the game, Shigeru Miyamoto, drew inspiration for making the game from exploring the world around him when he was young and trying to recreate the joy of discovering something new. In addition to the concept of exploration, communication was another key point of the game. Throughout the world, there are various NPCs with hints that help Link on his quest to gather the pieces of the Triforce and rescue Zelda. It also became something of a cultural phenomenon, with players frequently exchanging hints, tips, and secrets to others who had the game in a time before the internet was everywhere. The game had a ton of secrets to find and was enjoyable to explore the world with features that could be easily described, which enabled and encouraged this exchange of ideas. The game has proved to be massively successful, selling over 6.5 million copies, and was the first NES game to sell over 1 million. It has been re-released on numerous different Nintendo systems, including the GameCube, Game Boy Advance, Wii, and almost any system that has the Nintendo Virtual Console option. The plot is pretty simple. The land of Hyrule is invaded by Ganon, who steals the Triforce of Power. Zelda, the Princess of Hyrule, splits the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 parts and sends her handmaid Impa to find someone to help save Hyrule, and then she is captured by Ganon. Impa finds the hero and convinces him to save the kingdom and rescue the princess. None of that is explained in the game, however, but in the booklet that came with the game, as was pretty typical for the time. The game throws the player into the world with no on-screen explanation of what to do or where to go, not even a weapon or item to help the hero in his quest. Nowadays, almost everyone knows to enter the cave on the starting screen and listen to the old man tell them it's dangerous to go alone before giving the hero the starting sword. After that, the only thing left to do is explore, to find new lands, gather pieces of the Triforce, fight enemies, gain strength, and vanquish Ganon. Graphically, the game is dated. It's over 30 years old, and it shows, but this is the retro game. Even with blocky, pixelated sprites, most everything is identifiable and charming. Though some enemies are made up for the mythos of this game, and don't have anything to relate to outside the game, otherwise, there isn't much to say about the graphics. Classic NES with the limitations that has. The audio is solid. The opening title music prepares the player for the epic journey they are about to embark on, while the overworld theme sets a good backdrop and air of wonderment, and the dungeon music makes things tense to get the player ready for a confrontation with the boss. I think the biggest audio complaint I have is the constant beeping that happens when you only have one heart. Otherwise, the swing of the sword, the placing and explosion of bombs, the sound it makes when you pick up rupees, and the other little effects are all unique to their own situations and help the player really equate sound with action. The gameplay is great. It's action, it's adventure, it's open world exploration, it's an RPG, it's hack and slash, it's mystery. It's so very much in a very small file size. Everything feels smooth and you always feel in control of Link, and only rarely does it feel like you lost due to poor input rather than, say, being in a situation you didn't plan for or don't have the items for, or just being worn down by a tough dungeon. For me, the gameplay is pretty much broken down into two major categories: exploration and combat. Almost every screen has something to fight on it. The things closer to the beginning have easier enemies, so you can get nearly anywhere on the map from the very start of the game. Some of the further out enemies are quite tough. Without getting items and upgrades from around the world, it'll be difficult but not impossible to face them and beat them. It just requires a little bit of skill and patience. As far as exploration goes, there are a few places you cannot get without items from previous dungeons. You can't beat any dungeon beyond 3 without getting the ladder in Dungeon 4, which you need the raft from Dungeon 3 to reach, except, oddly enough, Dungeon 8, which has no mode to need the ladder to cross. So you go right to the penultimate dungeon and try your luck as soon as you find it. Other than dungeons, almost every bit of the map is available, and a knowledgeable player can grab a few extra hearts, better armor, and even an upgraded weapon and some other useful items before going into Dungeon 1. Even though the later games in the series would try to emulate it, few other Zelda titles managed the wonder of the open world right from the beginning, and at times the series became almost formulaic. Find an item in the dungeon, use it to beat the boss of the dungeon. This game, for the most part, doesn't have that. A couple of bosses need an item from their dungeon, and the final boss needs both an item from Dungeon 1 and from its own dungeon. But usually, you can beat the bosses with your sword or bombs. The dungeons give items that help explore, like the ladder and the raft, or general use items, like the magic key or the magical boomerang. Though there are also things like the magic wand and the bow, which are good for combat. Each step of the way, you are getting something to help you explore the world and move forward. This is a game that is practically the same age I am, and every time I come back to it, I find it a joy to play. From the way the series has gone throughout the years, and the numerous times this game has been relaunched on different platforms, I'm pretty sure that I am not the only person who feels this way. To me, it all comes back to the core concept of a good game, one that tests skills and enables the player to overcome the challenge without being insurmountable. It hits the stride just right of letting the player do things at their own pace, offering challenges to overcome, having an ultimate end goal to work towards, and nudging the player in the right direction. Sadly, I know the world a bit too well now. It has lost some of its wonder and mysterious nature. If you've never played it before, I recommend looking nothing up and giving it a shot. If you have played it before, it's always worth another run to see if you remember where everything is, or to find something you didn't know was in the game, or to test your skills with a no sword run through. As for to play or not to play, this one is easy. Give the game a shot. It's one of the best games for the NES, and one of the best games ever made in general. I hope you liked the video, and have a great day.